Welcome to Cider Chat. In this episode, we're going to be finding out about the new National Association for Canada called Cider Canada. All that and a bit more in this here episode 268 of Cider Chat. Hello, my name is Rhea Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. We'll be getting to that featured conversation with the interim president of Cider Canada, Barry Roque, coming right up. But first, we're going to hear a wee bit of news out and about in Ciderville. A big tip of the glass to Taddy Bogle Cider Works, which is located in western Pennsylvania, just south of the city of Pittsburgh. The area that Taddy Bogle is located in is absolutely stunning. And truthfully, I could say that about every part of the state. And the people, they're just so damn sweet. And particularly one particular person by the name of Kurt Henry, who is the fellow behind Taddy Bogle Cider Works. I happened to meet Kurt back in 2017 at the Chicago CiderCon. I was stationed at the Northman Cider Bar before the conference actually opened, and I was interviewing patrons. And down sat Kurt, introduced himself, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're a patron of Cider Chat. And it was just so cool to meet him. He's been so supportive. And if you follow social media, certainly Facebook, you'll see him posting around. He's just a really nice guy. And he contacted me and said that he would now like to raise his contribution to the commercial level for Cider Chat. Now, that just floored me, that he took the time to do that, and he wanted to be raising his contribution at a time when I know it ain't easy. And certainly ain't easy for a new cidery that's, kind of come fully online after this last year. My goodness. Speaking of which, the commercial level is $32 per month. Now, I figured that kind of considering, what does it cost for two, 750 ml bottles? That's, that could be around $32 per month. And if you get value from this podcast, hopefully if you're a commercial cider maker, you could afford that. Well, Kurt reached out and said he indeed wanted to do this, and, it just... Boy, it's all about abundance and staying in that mindset. And this is one of those people that really holds that. So thank you so much, Kurt. Thank you to everyone at Taddy Bogle. I couldn't imagine anything better than to be able to do a site visit there and just check the scene out. Because when you have people that really are moving through the world in kindness and gratitude, there is no doubt that the products that they are part of are going to be top quality. So I'm going to be putting a link in the show notes for Taddy Bogle Cider Works. Do check them out and know that when you are supporting them, in turn, they are supporting this here podcast to bring to you every week across the airways of the World Wide Web. Walking through the orchards. If you get value from this podcast and you'd like to become a patron, you could go to the Cider Chat Patreon page. That's spelled Patreon, or you could donate via the Cider Chat donate button at ciderchat.com. Dancing in the streets. I have some more amazing news from also another patron of Cider Chat who donates via the donate button at ciderchat.com, and that is Ambrosia Borowski. Now, you might know that name because Ambrosia and I did a presentation on Calvados at the 25th Annual Franklin County Cider Days, which happened in 2019. And Ambrosia now has a podcast, actually a revival of a podcast from 7 years ago, and it's called The Original Designated Drinkers. And you can find it on SoundCloud right now. I'm going to put a link in the show notes, and I really want to recommend this podcast. It's not going to just be cider specific. It's going to be covering the vast knowledge that Ambrosia has on the topic. And she's working with another co-host who I didn't get his name, but the two of them together, I mean, it is like a slam dunk. I'm super stoked for this project. I know Ambrosia's been wanting to revive a podcast for a while and just hit it out of the park. And this first one is all on Malort, which is a bitter spirit. And the history is absolutely fascinating, and it has a definite Chicago twist to it. In fact, I learned what a Chicago handshake is in terms of a drink special. And there was a Northman handshake drink that had, I think it was Malort and Calvados, if I have that correctly, and how it was described. So do check it out. It's called the Original Designated Drinkers. And wow, talk about abundance. There you go.
Smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Believe me, Ciderville, the good news keeps on rolling in. You may not feel that every day, but it is happening. And that's why you are listening to this here podcast. So make sure you subscribe, because there is some cool news happening in the UK. CraftCon 2021 is going to be taking place April 29th and 30th. So here's a little bit on this amazing virtual conference that you could sign up for that only costs $60 or so US dollars. So it's like 45 in a pound. I think that's how it goes. Anyways, it is hosted by the Three Counties Cider and Perry Association, and it's the only professional conference in the UK dedicated to the craft cider section. Andrew Lee will open the virtual conference that's going to be taking audiences to where the cider apples began. He's going to be talking about his journey to Kazakhstan. I know that happened a couple of years ago. Claude Jacquelier was on that trip, I believe. So it's going to be really cool. There's going to be some U.S. presenters such as Eleanor Leger from Eden Ciders. She also happens to be the newest elected president of the American Cider Association. Brian Rutsin, a.k.a. Cider Brian, he works at the Northman too. And he's going to be talking, and Sam Fritz of Ancho Cidery based in D.C. And I will be moderating a panel discussion titled Bring the Bellies to the Bar. And I would be doing that with Nikki Kong, the founder and owner of The Cat in the Glass, an online bottle shop, Kath Potter, who is a certified sommelier and member of Cider Women, Adam Wells, who is a writer and co-editor with Cider Review and Graphwood, and also a contributor to Full Juice Magazine and Distilled Magazine. So that's going to be fun. I mean, the list goes on. There's like so many people to cover, all these like amazing UK speakers. So there's going to, again, be a link in the show notes to CraftCon 2021. You want to get your tickets now. It's going to be in UK time, so that might be a little bit early for those of us in the US, but you get to rewatch the series over and over again, right? So that like makes it super easy to follow along. And you know that the folks in this region of the world have a lot of tips and a lot of insight that really helps us all worldwide continue to grow and help keep cider going up. So do check it out, and I hope to see you there. I am going to be getting up early in the morning. I want to get up early on that first day, even though my panel is later on in the afternoon. I want to be there for the opening of CraftCon. I mean, they're using the same program that CiderCon used this past year, and it was really cool, and there was like networking and just, drinking cider early in the morning at 3 a.m., why not? Something to look forward to. Okay, a little pause here, and I'll be right back. On top of having patrons for this podcast, Cider Chat also accepts sponsors. And one premier sponsor that has been regularly showcased for the past 16 weeks on this podcast is the international company known as Fermentis, which cultivates yeast strains. And we have Kevin Lane helping us with the Q&A with Fermentis. And this week, the question is, what Fermentis yeast strain recommendation do you have for industrial cider using AJC/sugar for cider in varying ratios? Take it away, Kevin.
Hello, my name is Kevin Lane, and I'm the Technical Sales Support Manager for the Americas for Fermentis. I would say the recommendation for that could be one of three out of our portfolio, either the Saf Cider AB1, Saf Cider AC4, Saf Cider AS2. From my understanding, I think Saf Cider AB1 is probably going to be the best choice, simply because it's so well balanced and can tolerate those really robust conditions, those really stressful conditions when you're bringing in apple juice concentrate that's going to be very deficient in nutrient, and also the addition of sugar, whether it's a sucrose or a dextrose, a pure glucose. But I mean, that could be true for the addition of other fruits as well. I think that Sap Cider AB1 is probably going to be a good starting point. And I say that because you'll be able to figure out the nutrition with that, understanding that it's a really balanced cider that you'll make with AB1. And then from there, it's kind of the direction I usually take with people when they ask what strain I recommend for something, because again, in the end, it's going to be the cider maker's choice and what their target is. So for this, I would say start with AB1, Sap Cider AB1, and then if you're looking for something more fresh and crisp, then maybe try Sap Cider AC4. If you're looking for a little bit more fullness to it, sweetness, complexity to it, I would say then maybe try AS2. But understand that you're going to have to add a nutrient regime to these fermentations in order for the yeast to perform accordingly and to produce a good tasting cider in the end. Yeast in that type of media, especially with the addition of, if it's a combination of apple juice concentrate and sugar, that's a really nutrient deficient media. So for sure, you'll probably have to add something just to give the yeast the nutrients that they demand, that they require for growth and for fermentation.
Geez Louise, I know it's hard enough to decide what kind of yeast to use when I'm doing a small batch of cider, never mind being a commercial maker and having to take into consideration so much. That's why it's nice to have somebody like Fermentis to kind of fill in the details, somebody that you can lean in to, like Kevin Lane, and say, dude, what do I do? And it sounds like he's recommending the AB1, the Sap Cider AB1. Find out more at fermentis.com. This episode is titled Cider Canada, but really I should have just called it Good News from Everywhere, including Canada, where we're going to go to next with Barry Roque. He is the interim president of Cider Canada, and he's also one of the co-founders of the Cider Crate, which is a website and blog, and they even have a podcast that comes out occasionally, all on cider in Canada. And Barry's background for starting associations, he's actually accredited to do that, is just phenomenal. And having that knowledge, I mean, get your pen out, folks, because if you are somewhere in the world right now where you're thinking about, I want to start a cider association, or there's a group of us who want to do it, he's throwing out knowledge bombs here all over the place. And I'm sure if you contacted him, he'd be more than happy to help out. So let's now head to our feature chat and grab a glass and find out everything there is to know at this point about the newest association for North America, Cider Canada. Barry Roque is the executive director of the National Campus Community Radio Association, and in that position, he oversees and supports 113 nonprofit radio stations across Canada. I asked him how he got into cider.
Because of that job, is my partner and I, Bethany, we relocated to Ottawa here to start this role back in 2015. And when we got here, we were trying to figure out what to do. We didn't really know anybody, and we'd been dating for a couple of years at that time, and sort of discovered cider as an opportunity and it growing in the area. So we decided, well, why not start a cider blog and do a little bit more than just reviewing ciders and get into some of the other things. So the Cider Crate was born.
Find out more at thecidercrate.com, where you'll find ciders that they reviewed, recipes, maps, and events.
That sort of led to the question of getting to know a lot of the cider producers in the province and around Canada, and saying, well, why isn't there something national? In the summer of 2020, pretty much everybody we talked to said they would be interested in a national cider association that would bring cider makers together, help with lobbying, advocacy, help with education and training, help with connecting the community together with news and information or sharing of communications, that type of thing. So started to chat with people and said, well, we've got this map. We run an industry map called cidersofcanada.ca, and it's a list of an interactive map that tells you where every cider producer is in the country in Canada. And there's around 340 or so cider producers. So we decided, well, why don't I poll all of those cider producers and see what they say? And about 100 got back to me. And everyone but 2 said a national cider association would be something we'd be interested in getting involved with. And because my background is in association management and I've gone through some of that development process, I said, okay, well, let's take this on as a new project and something that I think we could move towards really helping to bring everyone together. And we've started that process. We had, again, about 100 people respond, 30 or so expressed interest in a board of directors. We've since formally launched a board of directors with 14 members on it, a handful of cider producers, a few industry individuals as well. And we're in the process right now for Cider Canada, which is the formal name, or Cidre Canada, because we want to be bilingual, even though I'm not. We want to make sure we're inclusive of everyone. And we're in the process of essentially our last steps for incorporation. And we're right at the point where we're about to launch a website that outlines what some of the things that we're going to be offering and how you can join as a member, which would be, in theory, we haven't confirmed this yet, but free for the first year or so. And then there'll be a price point associated with how large the cider is and so on. It's come together very quickly. From that board of directors expressing interest in January to now, to where we're really at the point we're about to start to wave our hands and say, hey, we're here. Let's start to really bring people together and get signed on and get some of this work happening.
I asked Barry to talk to us a little bit about the history of cider in Canada today. And it won't surprise folks who are in the know to hear the name Grant Howes and Jennifer Dean, both of County Cider based in Ontario, Canada. Grant Howes was just a formidable person and really has left a lasting legacy. Unfortunately, though, and we did not talk about this in this particular conversation, but he died unexpectedly in January of 2017 when he had a heart attack in his sleep. You could hear the full story as told by Jennifer Dean in episode 137 of Cider Chat.
Most people know of Grant and Jennifer at County Cider. In Prince Edward County, and Grant's been referred to as the grandfather of Canadian cider, and there are easily 2 or 3 dozen people which in the interviews that we've gone back and talked to have said, well, if it wasn't for Grant and Jennifer, we wouldn't be here. They were the ones providing equipment and ideas and access points and so on. And it that was the late 80s, early 90s from when he got started, if I recall correctly. And it's really grown from there, right? From a dozen or so cider producers at the start of 2000 and even up to 2010. And now in Ontario, we're over 150 or close to 150 producers because of that. So they laid a lot of that groundwork.
Up next, Barry shares with us the challenge for commercial cider makers in Canada today.
Within the provinces, there's obviously different challenges, and it's usually related to the liquor laws. So I'll give you an example. Ontario has a 5-acre rule. Cider is classified under the wine side of things. So if you want to be able to sell out of, say, a retail store, you have to have 5 acres of fruit-bearing plants. And they have to be certified by the Provincial Liquor Association to do that. So that was always a barrier to getting started. Whereas, Alberta doesn't. They don't have apples. They don't have that process in place. So many breweries are ordering a bunch of apple juice, throwing them into the tank and doing it that way. Apple juice that is sold in Quebec as soft apple juice, non-alcoholic, it's almost all imported, because they're using the Quebec apples for the alcoholic side of things. And there's no interprovincial trade. You're not allowed to ship product across borders.
And of course, there is that worldwide challenge for all commercial makers when they're looking at getting cider out on the shelves.
We're always that additional, you're under wine as opposed to wine, beer, spirits, cider, right? We gotta find a way to solidify ourselves as that fourth acknowledged process that's separate from everything else. And we're being challenged by that, especially with things like excise tax, which is not new, but an issue now that's come really to the forefront, and we're in the front of seeing what that type of impact is going to have on producers, because there could be an incredibly large new amount of tax that goes on to cider production in Canada.
Yeah, so much to bundle together, isn't it? Well, you sound like just the person to be at the helm right now, so that's wonderful and so well spoken. I'm wondering, for the model for setting up this association, did you look at any other associations worldwide to help you define this? Because this is really a growing, I don't want to say business, but it is a business to run an association that many regions worldwide are trying to encompass. So how about for Canada?
I find it very funny that cider producers and nonprofit radio stations have very, very similar needs, which you wouldn't think at all there was that kind of crossover. But I can align it with, getting apples and working with apple growers. Well, that's the same as getting music and working with the music associations. Taxation problems, learning about how to run a business, learning about what it is to make your product better and to get listeners or to get new fans and drinkers. So there's actually a lot of similarity. When it comes to the structure, a lot of it, I think, comes out of the fact that I have experience in associations, and I do have a designation as a certified association executive. So I've gone through an intensive 18-month course with, 5 courses, and the longest exam I've ever written in my life is 36 hours. And I think I wrote 60 some pages worth of analysis. And I think just looking at going through that process and learning, and then what I've done in the past, and then connecting with some of the other groups like the wine growers group, the craft beer associations, just looking at those and saying there is an opportunity here. Let's listen to what our partners are saying and how they've set up, work with them to make sure that, okay, does this plan of action make sense to you, and get the feedback from those associations? Say, A, B, and C look really good. D, I think you're ahead of yourself on this. You should be looking at doing E first, and E might need to change this way. And it's just, again, communication and working with people. But you've probably noticed this yourself. The cider industry as a whole is very positive. Right? It's a very good group of people to be working with. There's usually a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of enjoyment in what people do. And I think that's what really helps to drive me interest going forward, because every time we reach out to talk with somebody else new, they're coming back with ideas, solutions, support. And that's why I think we can continue to grow and develop. So there's a bit of that that knowledge around the book smart knowledge. There's a bit of the knowledge around what has been successful in the past, or what we've seen traditionally happen. And then there's a bit of we can experience and take it into new directions as well. So we're still battling what's the right way to go about member fees. Is it going to be inclusive with your provincial association? Is it going to be an add-on? Is it going to be some sort of split? Are we doing it monthly? Are we doing it annually? What are the price points? How are we splitting it? Are we splitting it by volume, by sales, by revenue? Is it a percentage? Is it a tier? All of those things we're still trying to work out, and working with our partners to figure out what that means. But it seems to be coming together quite nicely in that sense, and quite positive.
What is the goal here then to by the end of this year, 2021, for the Canadian Cider Association? And that is the actual name of the association. Is that true? Or
we've decided to go with Cider Canada.
Cider Canada.
Cider Canada, Cidre Canada. Okay. To formalize that. Our timeline looks as though in the fall, early winter, we hope to have a formal AGM. That AGM would have our first non-interim board of directors
What
put
is
into
that
place.
AGM? Can you just
So yeah, an
break it down?
AGM is an annual general meeting, and the annual general meeting in the nonprofit realm is the once a year system in which you do the business of the organization. So this includes things like approving an auditor, reviewing the minutes, setting up members of your membership join the board of directors. So you take from your membership and you create a leadership team. That leadership team is designed for strategy, for forward thinking, for goal setting. And then you've got your paid staff who do the operations. Now, paid staff help with organizing the strategy, of course, because they're the ones working on the ground, but that's this generalized setup. So what we're sitting at right now is we have an interim board of directors. The idea of these 13, 14 individuals that are on it are to get us to the point where we're ready to bring on a first round of formal board members. And that those formal board members will have things like their bylaws, their financial policies, the committee structures, staffing organized, membership dues set up, all of those sort of things that you need to be able to say, okay, we're opening the door and turning the lights on and welcoming in not only potential members, but also, starting to do those things that are happening at the national level that need to be done.
You have to make it sustainable, no doubt. Do Canadians, when they hear cider or cidre, are they thinking fermented apple juice?
Yeah, I think most people think that way. I don't think adding the hard to it is very common. You'll go into a bar, or you'll go into a liquor store or a grocery store, and it just reads cider. It doesn't say, and if there is something that is, more of an artisanal apple juice, then it will say non-alcoholic cider on it. But just general apple juice as unfermented apple juice is obviously very prevalent around there, and it's just considered that. The nomenclature around cider, the non-alcoholic side, is usually the really traditional farm cider. You're out for a hayride in the fall or something of that nature, and or at a skating rink, or we've got a group here that is called River Oak, and they have 30 acres of wild apples, and they press their own non-alcoholic cider and sell it to people who skate the 3-kilometer skating rink that's underneath the trees. So they call that different. Just cider? Is that so? If it's artisanal cider, okay. Yeah, so there is that confusion. They haven't separated it as much. I think it's just the acknowledgement that cider is traditionally alcoholic, and then they'll add the word non-alcoholic if it's not.
Are there many cider mills where you could show up, as you were just saying, and if you are a non-commercial maker, a hobbyist, or somebody just curious of fermenting, what's the reach there? Are there a lot of those in, like, say, Ontario or other places where you could get bulk cider to ferment? Yeah.
Once you get into the industrial side of things, that's where those agreements come into place. And, some of the apple orchards run out of product. But the majority of apple orchards will provide bulk cider for personal use, or bulk pressed apple juice for personal use. And within an hour drive, I could probably name 4 or 5 from where we're at, which we could get product from. Right. But they operate as apple orchards and farm orchards and so on. Some do press and create their own cider. There's actually in Ontario and many other places, there's a large subsection of wine producers that will produce 1 or 2 ciders when wine is not in season. So they'll tend to go, okay, well, we've got a couple of vats available, and we will press our one-off apple in it and spend the 3 months to do that process, clean all their equipment, and then the rest of the 9 months they're back into the wine making, right? Which they can do on a faster rotation and have easier access. But that happens quite a lot in the fall when apples are relevant and ready, and the grapes of process is already passed. So there's actually quite a few wineries that have a cider that they sell on the side.
People don't realize that you have like some amazing terroir there. So let's just talk about that. And I know that this is difficult because you're talking about a huge area to cover. But if you were going to describe Canadian cider, is there anything that you might be able to like fill into listeners out there in Ciderville on the terroir of Canada, or particularly, well, we mentioned the ice cider, and that's always a good thing to talk about, of course. But how would you just describe that's the uniqueness of your country?
Yeah, there definitely is a variety of changes. I would say there's probably 4 major regions. If you go talk to someone who's a researcher and a little more into it, they'll probably narrow that down a little bit more than me. Atlantic, you've got the Annapolis Valley, which is a very well-known space for apple production. Product in the Atlantic tends to be a little softer, a little bit sweeter. More apple juice like, which is great for me because I kind of like that side of things. Quebec as its own market definitely stands out. Apples that grow in Quebec are a little more harsher, so they tend to be a little bit more tannic. They're your Macintoshes, your Ida Reds, that type of thing. You can almost always tell a Quebec cider, like instantly it's a Quebec cider. It doesn't have that sort of taste that others do. It's a little bit more acidic, a little bit more tannic, and so on. Again, kind of a little bit closer at times to something you would get from Europe, but also not. Ontario is really neat because it definitely has its own taste to it. I think a lot of what you would get in northern around northern New York State and so on is somewhat similar, but the apples tend to be a little bit more brighter, a little bit more alcoholic in nature, and they do vary in different sort of in fields, depending on obviously the processes that you're putting in. We've got some producers that are doing extremely unique products that you won't find anywhere else. The big ones that you've probably heard of are Revel Cider and Guelph. West Ave cider, and they're using the more traditional and longer standing processes. Fieldbird is another great example in Prince Edward County. You're starting to see things like Hardway Cider, who does barrel aging and so on. So, not overly unique in North America, but in Ontario, you're starting to see those differences, which is separating the market a little bit more. And then when you head yourself out west, the Okanagan Valley is the big spot when it comes to apple growers in British Columbia. And they, again, have a bit of their own vibe and feel to it just with what they can offer. It's a little bit more mineral-based in that sense, but it's also, again, a big difference of what products are being put into place. And then, again, the size of the cider producer. I mean, you've got major growers, groups like Growers or No Boats on Sunday or whatnot, which are almost national in the sense, and what they produce has a much different flavor than someone who's just down the road and doing it out of their backyard or their garage, and do have a license and do sell to that community. Again, very different perspectives. But it's all needed. It's the same idea as music. There's pop, rock, and dance, and there's blues, country, jazz, and accordion music, right? So, and that's what I really like about the Canada is that a lot of the product that's made here, it can be very niche, but it's almost always really good. And yeah, there's a couple bad songs or bad batches out there, which I would pass on. But in general, most people who are just trying cider here in Canada will pick up a local one and they go, wow, that's so much different than your Somersby or your Strongbow, and sort of start progressing into a little bit more experimental, a little less commercial.
Nothing beats having somebody at the helm who knows how to get things going. So thanks again, Barry, and best of luck to all of you creating the newest association for North America, Cider Canada. All I could say, wow, Ciderville, you keep on surprising me every single day. All the emails coming in, so much positivity and happenings around the world. So wait till next week because there'll be more to share with you when I return with episode 269. But for now, I leave you here. This is Rhea Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
Like cider, we like palms, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like palms, we like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes we do. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Ba-da-da-dum. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We like orchards, having some fun. Yeehaw!